Hello everyone, welcome to Occult Lessons. Let's adjust that a little bit. Ignore my windswept locks. This week we will be discussing a specific book that had a very a large impact on Western occultism, and that is The Three Books of Occult Philosophy by Cornelius Agrippa. To open up with, we can discuss who Cornelius Agrippa is. Welcome Jeff, Jessica, Anna, Daniel, Lobsel. Thank you for joining us, and other folks as well. If you've never heard of Cornelius Agrippa, he was a theologian and an occultist, a general academic who lived and traveled in Europe, especially France and Italy, a couple other places, and wrote down a lot of various conjectures and research of various occult and scientific things that were believed to be scientific at the time. And got into a little trouble for it because you might recognize the word Inquisition. He lived during that time period. He kind of straddled the line between getting in trouble and not getting in trouble. He framed his research from a scientific point of view, and his book, in fact, has multiple letters opening up the book where he is discussing, he has written letters to other theologians, to priests, saying this is completely scientific, this is all meant to be research, this is all meant to be white magic, none of this is evil, kind of trying to cover his back. The Inquisition still didn't like him. They tried to stop the publications of his works. He got into more trouble for defending witches and condemning the witch burnings. He was arrested, never for witchcraft or any of that, but he was arrested for other things like debt and, he generally was not liked by the powers that be. But he still managed to spend most of his life traveling, researching, and writing down what he was researching. The three books are divided into three sections discussing the three types of scientific magic that he that he believed in, the way that he codified all this work. Most of his ideas come from the Kabbalah. They come from general occult traditions of the time. They come from Neoplatonism, and they kind of pull all those ideas together and present them in a way that brought it out to the forefront to occultists that would come later. This would be heavily influential on later people researching this kind of stuff. That is not the same guy. That was Carpenter, John Carpenter. He was a 20th century occultist, I do believe. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to read through parts of the first book. I don't know how far we'll get, but I thought it'd be fun to actually read and see what these kinds of grimoires, how they read, how they presented their work, and then translating some of the ideas into more understandable language, since this can be really hard to understand. I still don't understand some of it. And the only book I've found that walks through and tries to explain a lot of it does it in very broad strokes. It doesn't actually go chapter by chapter. It doesn't define words. It just kind of says, here's an idea that he had, and then goes from there. And that was not very helpful to me. I didn't like that. I wanted a book that I could set next to this and be like, okay, comparing ideas. So let's see. There is literally so many chapters. Okay. Each of the chapters is very short. It's literally like a page to 2 pages. And they are divided again into 3 books, but they're really part of one book. So here's chapter 1. How magicians collect virtues from the threefold world is declared in these 3 books. Seeing there is a threefold world, elementary, celestial, and intellectual, and every inferior is governed by its superior, and receiveth the influence of the virtues thereof, so that the very original and chief worker of all doth by angels, the heavens, stars, elements, animals, plants, metals, and stones convey from himself the virtues of his omnipotency upon us, for whose service he made, and created all these things. Wise men conceive it no way irrational that it should be possible for us to ascend by the same degrees through each world to the same very original world itself, the maker of all things, and first cause, from whence all things are and proceed, and also to enjoy not only these virtues, which are already in the more excellent kind of things, but also beside these to draw new virtues from above. That was one sentence. You can see why this would be very hard to read. His idea of the threefold world, it basically divides all of his scientific research and magic into three kinds. There's like the physical realm, there's a spiritual realm, there's an angelic kind of heavenly realm. And his idea is the origin, or at least another example of the idea of as above, so below. If this is how it is up in the heavens, then this is how it is down here. And it's kind of a ladder of a hierarchy defining the universe and where everything stands. And his idea is, if this is true, if everything above is as below, and there are rules governing the universe that say, you know, if things happen this way, this will happen, then certainly if we understand that ladder, we can climb back up and reach back up to the original holy source, which you'll remember as being something you hear about in alchemy. This is something that comes into play in Kabbalah. He's combining a lot of different older ideas and presenting them in his own framework, his way of seeing the universe inspired by older ideas. Yeah, his run-on sentences are pretty bad. Hence it is that they seek after the virtues of the elementary world through the help of physic and natural philosophy and the various mixtions of natural things, then of the celestial world and the rays and influences thereof, according to the rules of astrologers and the doctrines of mathematicians, joining the celestial virtues to the former. Moreover, they ratify and confirm all these with the powers of diverse intelligences through the sacred ceremonies of religion. So yeah, there's notes here that kind of help translate it. When he says threefold, he imagines it as terrestrial, physical, astrological, which is space, outer space, and then spiritual, which is kind of both, because they saw the heavens as being literally in outer space, but there's also a spiritual realm here on Earth, kind of the union of the two. The order and process of all these I shall endeavor to deliver in these 3 books, where the first contains natural magic, the second celestial, and the third ceremonial, meaning spiritual, religious. But I know not whether it be an unpardonable presumption in me that I, a man of so little judgment and learning, should in my very youth so confidently set upon a business so difficult, so hard, and so intricate as this. Wherefore, whatsoever things have here already, and shall afterwards be said by me, I would not have any one assent to them, nor shall I myself any farther than they shall be approved by the universal church and the congregation of the faithful. I'm just going to read the note here that the translator puts. Agrippa knew he was walking a fine line between philosophy and witchcraft, as far as the learned opinion of the day was concerned, and was very much subject to the whims of the church. See the guarded warning to this effect at the end of his letter to Tremendous. So yeah, basically that last chapter is covering his butt and saying, listen, I'm not encouraging witchcraft. This is just research. Don't get mad at me. So that is chapter 1. It's literally just 1 page, and it says, I see the world as being 3 parts. This is the way that the world functions. If we can understand how it functions, we can return to the original source of everything, which is God. Please don't burn me at the stake for witchcraft. What magic is, what are the parts thereof, and how the professors thereof must be qualified. Magic is a faculty of wonderful virtue, full of most high mysteries, containing the most profound contemplation of most secret things, together with the nature, power, quality, substance, and virtues thereof, as also the knowledge of whole nature, and it doth instruct us concerning the differing and agreement of things amongst themselves, whence it produceth its wonderful effects by uniting the virtues of things through the application of them one to the other, and to their inferior suitable subjects, joining and knitting them together thoroughly by the powers and virtues of superior bodies. That is another 1 sentence. And again, it kind of touches on the same idea of everything is connected by this hierarchy of powers, of how much of the essence and true a life of God is in them. This is the most perfect and chief science, that sacred and sublimer kind of philosophy, and lastly the most absolute perfection of all most excellent philosophy, foreseeing that all regulative philosophy is divided into natural, mathematical, and theological. Natural philosophy teacheth the nature of those things which are in the world, searching and inquiring into their causes, effects, times, places, fashions, events, their whole and parts, and also the number and nature of those things called elements, what fire, earth, air forth brings. From whence the heavens their beginnings had, whence tide, whence rainbow in gay colours clad, what makes the clouds that gathered are in black to send forth lightnings and a thundering crack? What doth the nightly flames and comets make? What make the earth to swell and then to quake? What is the seed of metals and of gold? What virtues, wealth doth nature's coffers hold? So this is the first example. Let me make sure it's who I think it is. We don't know, actually, it says here. He quotes a lot of older literature, fictional literature as we would see it, but which at the time it seems he definitely saw as historical, and which others may have as well. Apparently this quote can't be found, at least this translator did not find it, but other quotes which come next are from Virgil and the Aeneid, and other like Greek plays of and works of that kind, which he will reference as if they are examples and proof of magic. You think of like things that fictional characters in these works did, the kind of magical things they did, he takes as proof of magical events. All these things doth natural philosophy, the viewer of nature, contain, teaching us according to Virgil's Muse, whence all things flow, whence mankind, beast, whence fire, whence rain and snow, whence earthquakes are, why the whole ocean beats over his banks and then again retreats, whence strength of herbs, whence courage, rage of brutes, all kinds of stone, of creeping things and fruits. I believe that is Virgil's. No, this is from Georgix II. The other lines he cannot place. So he mentions Virgil, but none of these lines are actually from Virgil. That's funny. But mathematical philosophy teaches us to know the quantity of natural bodies as extended into 3 dimensions, and to conceive of the motion and course of celestial bodies. As in great haste, what make the golden stars to march so fast, what makes the moon sometimes to mask her face, the sun also as if in some disgrace. And as Virgil sings, how the sun doth rule with 12 zodiac signs, the orbs that measured round about the lines. It doth the heaven's starry way make known, and strange eclipses of the sun and moon. Arcturus also, and the stars of rain, the 7 stars likewise, and Charles his wain. Why winter suns make towards the west so fast, what makes the nights so long ere they be past. Aw, thank you, Daniel. All which is understood by mathematical philosophy. Hence by the heavens we may foreknow the seasons all, times for to reap and sow, and when 'tis fit to launch into the deep, and when to war, and when into peace and sleep, and when to dig up trees and them again to set that they so may bring forth amen. It's so interesting to me that this is a science that for its scientific proof takes poetry and fiction as example. And of course, that's not, scientific in our modern view, but it's just very interesting. He will also do this with the Bible. The Bible will be shown as being proof of his beliefs. Essentially, what he's saying here is he's dividing up and defining different ways of seeing the world. There is mathematical ways to see the world. There are philosophical ways of seeing the world. He divides it kind of. Natural science is probably like biology, defining what animals are. Mathematical would be more like physics, and theological is the religious viewpoint. Theological philosophy or divinity teaches what God is, what the mind, what an intelligence, what an angel, what a devil, what the soul, what religion, what sacred institutions, rites, temples, observations, and sacred mysteries are. It instructs us also concerning faith, miracles, the virtues of words and figures, the secret operations and mysteries of seals, and as Apuleius saith, it teaches us rightly to understand and to be skilled in the ceremonial laws, the equity of holy things, and rule of religions. But to recollect myself. Oh my goodness, I'm going to double check something. That whole section where he was quoting all those things, those were all in parentheticals. It's about 9 paragraphs in parentheticals. So this is actually Oh my goodness, that was all just parentheticals. These three principal faculties magic comprehends, unites, and actuates. Deservedly, therefore, was it by the ancients esteemed as the highest and most sacred philosophy. So he's saying that the world is divided into natural philosophy, the study of biology and the physical body, mathematical, the study of physics and math, and religious, the study of the soul, the spirit of our inner world. And that magic takes all three of those and combines them into a new thing, and that is why it is more powerful than all of them combined. We're going to skip the rest of this chapter because it's basically him just referencing a bunch of old people. Chapter 3 of the Four Elements, their qualities and mutual mixtions. You should recognize, if you've seen some of the other episodes of this, the belief that there were four elements that composed everything in the world, and each of them was themselves composed of two qualities, and that the changing of those qualities was what changed one element to another. He's about to explain all those ideas in his antiquated language. There are four elements, and original grounds of all corporeal things: fire, earth, water, air, of which all elemented bodies are compounded, not by way of heaping them together, but by transmutation and union, and when they are destroyed, they are resolved into elements. For there is none of the sensible elements that is pure, but they are more or less mixed, and apt to be changed one into the other. Even as earth becomes dirty, and being dissolved becomes water, the same being made thick and hard becomes earth again, but being evaporated through heat passeth into air, and being kindled passeth into fire. And this being extinguished returns back again into air, but being cooled again after burning becomes earth or stone or sulfur, and this is manifested by lightning. So he's saying when you burn a physical thing, like you can set something on fire, then what's left over is ash, which is dirt. If you heat up water, then it becomes air. Like there's this idea that there's this flow of the elements into one another, and it is that flow that creates everything. It's not so much that everything is like this, I am made of fire. I am made of the four elements in union together, the transmutation of them, which to a certain extent, in their ancient understanding makes sense. Plato was of that opinion, that earth was wholly changeable, and that the rest of the elements are changed as into this, so into one another successively. But it is the opinion of the subtler sort of philosophers, that earth is not changed, but relented and mixed with other elements, which do not dissolve it, and it returns back to itself once again. Now every one of the elements hath two special qualities, the former whereof it retains as proper to itself, and the other as a mean it agrees with that which comes next after it. So that's the idea that there's a primary quality and a sub-quality that defines all these things, and it is the changing of the sub-quality that will change it to something else. For fire is hot and dry, earth dry and cold, the water cold and moist, the air moist and hot. And so after this manner of elements, according to two contrary qualities, are contrary one to the other, as fire to water and earth to air. Moreover, the elements are upon another account opposite one to the other, for some are heavy as earth and water, and others are light as air and fire. Wherefore the Stoics called the former passives and the latter actives. So in other words, you define the four elements which make up everything, and their union and their changing into one another. They are defined by these qualities, and by changing the qualities, that's how you change the element. If you make fire, which is hot and dry, wet, it becomes something else. Once again, Plato distinguishes them after another manner, and assigns to every one of them three qualities. To fire, brightness, thinness, and motion, but to earth, darkness, thickness, and quietness. This idea isn't really held on to by many other occultists. According to these qualities, the elements of fire and earth are contrary. So he's just basically talking over ideas that are kind of outdated at this point. This is the root and foundation of all bodies, natures, virtues, and wonderful works. And he which shall know these qualities of the elements and their mixtions, mixtion being mixture in old-timey language, shall easily bring to pass such things that are wonderful and astonishing, and shall be perfect in magic. So that's that chapter. Basically, there are four elements. The union and transformation of them is what creates everything. Not their static existence, but the way that they change into one another. And that is the source of all magic. If you understand how that function works, you can use it to make what you want, change things, transform them. This is the heart of magic, the heart of alchemy. And of course, the changing of the elements is rooted in changing their qualities to a different quality. Of a threefold consideration of the elements. There are then, as we've said, 4 elements without the perfect knowledge whereof we can effect nothing in magic. Now each of them is threefold, so that the number of 4 may make up the number of 12, and by passing by the number of 7 into the number of 10, there may be a progress to the supreme unity upon which all virtue and wonderful operation depends. So this goes back to something we've discussed in the past, which is the importance given to numbers in magic and the specific associations each number had with a specific thing. Here what he's saying is, if each element is threefold, there's 4 elements, and if each one has 3 aspects, then that makes 12 as the number that you come up with. 12 is the 12 zodiac signs, which is a really important number. They pass by the number of 7 into the number of 10, which basically is, let me see if I can explain this. If you add 7 to 12, 12 being the number we got by multiplying 3 by 4, and 7 being the 7 planets or the 7 elements, like they're rock elements, not magic elements. You add 7 to 12, and that makes 19. If you add 1 and 9, that makes 10. This is how he's coming up with this number of making the perfect number is 10. And because 1 and 0 is 1, that is God. So he's basically kind of thrown numbers around and said, aha! If the elements are 3 times 4, and you add 7 to that, and then you add the 1 and the 9, that becomes 10, which is 1 plus 0, which is God! This is the kind of number play that these occultists did all the time. Okay. Of the first order are the pure elements, which are neither compounded nor changed, nor admit of mixtion, but are incorruptible, and not of which, but through with the virtues of all natural things are brought into act. No man is able to declare their virtues, because they can do all things upon all things. Of the second order are elements that are compounded, changeable, and impure, yet such as may by art be reduced to their pure simplicity, whose virtue, when they are thus reduced, doth above all things perfect all occult and common operations of nature, and these are the foundation of the whole natural magic. Of the third order are those elements which originally and of themselves are not elements, but are twice compounded, various and changeable one into the other. They are the infallible medium, and therefore are called the middle nature, or soul of the middle nature. Okay. So, he is again playing number games here. The first order of elements is the prime numbers. Probably 2, 3, 5, 7. The second order are the even-ish numbers, probably also 9. And the third order is being able to add them together. He's basically saying he's creating a system by which the numbers are given specific importance. So if you the changeable elements are, if you have 2 of something, that number is considered changeable. It's a lot of really nonsensical math, but they had a system by which it made sense to them. It doesn't make a lot of sense outside of that system. Anyway, he's going to talk about, in that chapter, what fire and earth does. He's going to talk about water and air and what they do. Let's skip to something that discusses something besides the elements. Let's talk about something else. Because if we just read them all in order, we're not going to discuss everything. So let's try this. The kinds of compounds, what relation they stand in to the elements, and what relation there is betwixt the elements themselves and the soul, senses, and dispositions of men. Next after the 4 simple elements follow the 4 kinds of perfect bodies compounded of them, and they are stones, metals, plants, and animals. And although unto the generation of each of these all the elements meet together in the composition, yet every one of them follows and resembles one of the elements which is most predominant. So now he's discussing how the universe is made of 4 elements. Well, how do those elements make things? So the things they make are stones, metals, plants, animals. Stones are earthy, for they are naturally heavy and descend, and so hardened with dryness cannot be melted. But metals are waterish and may be melted, which naturalists confess, and chemists find to be true, that they are generated of a viscous water or waterish argent vive. So this is a heart of one thing that occultists and alchemists believed very heavy. Metals are water to them. You think about mercury, the way that it's, you think about it's in a thermometer, it's a liquid, and the fact that when you heated up metals, they would melt and become very liquidy. Of course, they'd solidify if they got cold. But to them, rocks and metals were different, where rocks are going to be hard solids. They're going to be earthy. But metals are going to be liquid, even though to us, we might not look at a metal, like I wouldn't look at a freaking silver and say, yes, this is water, but they would. Plants have an affinity with the air, that unless they be abroad in the open air, they do neither bud nor increase. So also all animals have in their natures a most fiery force, and spring from a celestial source. And fire is natural to them, and being extinguished, they presently die. So, plants are seen as airy creatures because they pollinate and they survive through air moving their spores and their seeds. And so they are seen as actually being elements of the air. We are fire, which it makes a little sense. We all run hot. And when we die, our bodies go cold. And so even though, you don't think of a blazing flame and think, yes, a human being. There is a kind of inner warmth that they would qualify as coming from a source of fire, specifically the divine fire, because humans have pieces of God inside them. But all animals were seen as being from the elements of fire because they all run hot. Again, with every one of those kinds is distinguished within itself by reason of degrees of the elements. For among the stones, they especially are called earthy, that are dark and more heavy. And those waterish, which are transparent and are compacted of water, as crystal, beryl, and pearls in the shells of fishes. And they are called airy, which swim upon the water, and are spongious as stones of spuns. So he's going to go through a lot of different examples and say, okay, yeah, plants are airy, rocks are heavy, but these ones we kind of see as being straddling the line, So like this plant can also be seen as very watery because it grows next to rivers, that kind of thing. The kind of blurring of the lines where they say that this plant will have air elements, but also some water element in it because it's a lotus, Okay. Let's see, does it say anything else about humans and fire? It doesn't look like it does. All right. So now he's going to move on to how the elements are in the heavens, in the stars, in devils, in angels, and lastly, in God himself. So this is going to deal with the hierarchy of heaven, which he didn't invent, but what he's going to codify with his system here. It is the unanimous consent of all Platonists that is in the original and exemplary world, all things are in all. So also in this corporeal world, all things are in all. This is the idea that if it exists, it is in everything. If the element of fire exists, everything has a little fire in it. If God exists, there's a little of God in everyone. It's a hard idea, but basically it says that every single thing that exists in this world is in every single thing. That is what all things are in all. Now, in these inferior bodies, the elements are accompanied with much gross matter. But in the heavens, the elements are with their natures and virtues after a celestial and more excellent manner than in sublunary things. For the firmness of the celestial earth is there without the grossness of water, and the agility of air without running over its bounds, the heat of fire without burning, only shining and giving life to all things by its heat. So this is the idea that all of these elements and things that make up the universe exist in heaven, as above, so below. If there's fire on earth, there's fire in the heavens, but it's a better fire because the physical world corrupts things and dilutes them. In heaven, fire doesn't hurt and doesn't burn. It's just beautiful and bright and shining. Amongst the stars also, some are fiery as Mars and Sol, airy as Jupiter and Venus, watery as Saturn and Mercury, and earthy such as inhabit the eighth orb and the moon. So this is where there's a lot of categorizing of things as belonging to specific elements or specific this or that. Eventually they'll do it with the zodiac. They'll say this star has to do with this thing and this element and this rock. And a lot of it had to do with, say, if this rock is a red color and Mars is red, they're both going to be associated with each other. Blood is red, so they're going to be associated with blood, and blood coming from bloodshed. That's how you get Mars as a war god. All these various these association games are what is going to connect everything in magic and say, okay, this category belongs to this category belongs to that. Seeing as if it were earth, it attracts to itself the celestial waters, which with being imbibed, it doth by reason of its nearness to us power out and communicate to us. There are also amongst the signs some fiery, some earthy, some airy, some watery. The elements rule them also in the heavens, distributing to them the threefold considerations of every element, the beginning, middle, and end. So Aries possesseth the beginning of fire, Leo the progress and increase, and Sagittarius the end. This has to do with how each zodiac sign is divided into a season, and that's associated with an element. So, Aries and Leo and Sagittarius are all fire signs, but they have to do with the order of the falling and rising of the sign. Aries is the beginning of the season, Leo is the middle, Sagittarius is the end. So Aries is the beginning fire, Leo is the middle fire. You see, and he does that with each one of them. Capricorn's the end of the earth elements, and that all has associations with what they represent. Moreover, devils are also upon this account distinguished the one from the other, so that some are called fiery, some earthy, some airy, and some watery. Hence also those 4 infernal rivers: fiery Phlegethon, airy Cocytus, watery Styx, earthy Acheron. This is more Greek mythology presented as scientific fact. The Greeks believed that there were 4 rivers in the underworld that each had their own kind of reasons for existing. One of them was a river that you drank from and you had forgetfulness. One was the river of the dead. One was literally a river of fire. So it's easy to see which one he says is the fire element, but it was literally just a river of fire through hell. And he assigns each one its element. This whole chapter is just, this thing is a air thing, and this thing is a fire thing, because categorizing things was such an important cornerstone of magic. Because once you categorize something, you can use it as a tool to say, okay, I want to cast this kind of magic, I need this kind of category of resources. Okay. In the Gospel, we read of hellfire and eternal fire, into which the cursed shall be commanded to go. And in the Revelation, we read of a lake of fire, and Isaiah speaks of the damned, that the Lord will smite them with corrupt air. And in Job, they shall skip from the waters of the snow to the extremity of heat. And in the same we read that the earth is dark and covered with the darkness of death and miserable darkness. Once again, using the Bible as scientific resource. These elements are placed in the angels in heaven, and the blessed intelligences. There is in them a stability of their essence, which is an earthly virtue, and which is the steadfast seed of God. Also their mercy and piety is a watery, cleansing virtue. Here by the psalmist they are called waters, when he speaking of the heavens saith, Who ruleth the waters that are higher than the heavens? Also in them their subtle breath is air, and their love is shining fire. Hence they are called in Scripture the wings of the wind. And in another place the psalmist speaks of them, Who makest angels thy spirit, and thy ministers a flaming fire. Also according to orders of angels, some are fiery as seraphim, and authorities, and powers. Earthly as cherubim, watery as thrones and archangels, airy as dominions and principalities. So again, he's dividing things up. If you're going to cast a spell that needs airy influence, whatever, and you want to call on some angels, you should call on the dominions or principalities because they're the airy ones. All these, chapters just dividing the universe into categories. Do we not also read of the original maker of all things, that the earth shall be opened and bring forth a Savior? Is it not spoken of the same, that he shall be a fountain of living water, cleansing and regenerating? Is not the same Spirit breathing the breath of life, and the same, according to Moses and Paul's testimony, a consuming fire? Elements, therefore, are to be found everywhere, and in all things after their manner no man can deny. First in these inferior bodies, feculent and gross, and in celestials more pure and clear, but in supercelestials living and in all respects blessed. Elements, therefore, in the exemplary world are ideas of things to be produced. In intelligence, in distributed powers, in heavens are virtues, and inferior bodies gross forms. So the word ideas here is capitalized. That comes from Plato. He had this concept that there exists in the spiritual realm ideas, which is basically the concept of a thing exists as a spiritual entity. So the idea of water is the spiritual concept of water exists as a kind of universal concept in the spiritual universe. It's kind of a hard thing to explain, and he barely covers it here. But that was him saying, elements are everywhere. I can prove it. The Bible says so. And everything is made of elements, even the angels and the heavens. All right, so still a lot of elemental talk. Let's see here. This should be fun. So this is the occult virtues of things. So this is where he's going to say some things have weird special effects for reasons we don't know that have nothing to do with elements. And he's going to theorize on what some of these are. There are other virtues in things which are not from any element, as to expel poison, to drive away noxious vapors, to attract iron or anything else. And this virtue is a sequel of the species and form of this or that thing, whence also it being little in quantity is of great efficiency, which is not granted to any elemental quality. For these virtues, having much form and little matter, can do very much, but an elementary virtue, because it hath more materiality, requires much matter for its acting. And they are called occult qualities because their causes lie hid, and man's intellect cannot in any way reach and find them out. So this is mankind figuring out certain things can cure poisons or are immune to certain diseases and not understanding why, so they assign them this magical capability. They define it as magic because scientifically they can't yet understand it. There are in things, besides the elementary qualities which we know, other certain inbred virtues created by nature, which we admire and are amazed at, being such as we know not, and indeed seldom or never have seen, as we read in Ovid of the phoenix, one only bird which renews herself. Ovid is a Greek writer who wrote about mythology. So again, the only scientific resources he has referenced in this book are mythology and Bibles. All birds from others do derive their birth, but yet one fowl there is in all the earth, called by the Assyrians phoenix, who the wane of age repairs and sows herself again. And in another place, Egyptus came to see this wondrous sight, and this rare bird is welcomed with delight. Long since Matrius brought a very great wonderment upon the Greeks and Romans concerning himself. He said that he nourished and bred a beast that did devour itself. Hence many to this day are solicitous what this beast of Matrius could be. Who would not wonder that fishes should be digged out of the earth, of which Aristotle, Theophrastus, and Polybus the historian make mention? So this is a reference to a they had this weird fish. I'm just gonna read this. In the vicinity of Heraclea and Crama, in the river Lycus, as well as in many parts of the Euxine, there is one kind of fish which frequents the waters near the banks of the river and makes holes for itself in which it lives, even when the water retires and the bed of the river is dry, for which reason these fishes have to be dug out of the ground. So in other words, they don't understand the scientific reasoning for why these fish can do that, so they're like, dude, look, magic fish lives in the dirt! And probably it adapted to be able to survive when the waters receded. So the ostrich conducts cold and most hard iron, and digests it into nourishment for his body, whose stomach, they also report, cannot be hurt with red-hot iron. So the little fish, called Echinus, doth so curb the violence of the winds, and appease the rage of the earth, that let the tempest be never so imperious and raging, the sails bearing a full gale, it doth notwithstanding by its mere touch stay the ships, and make them stand still, that by no means can be moved. So salamanders and crickets live in the fire, although they seem sometimes to burn, they are not hurt. The like is said of a kind of bitumen, which the weapons of the Amazons were said to be smeared over, by which that means they could be spoiled neither with sword nor fire. with which also the gates of Caspia made of brass are reported to be smeared over by Alexander the Great. We read also that Noah's Ark was joined together with bitumen, and that endured some thousands of years upon the mountains of Armenia. These are all basically folk tales and myths and references to fictional creatures that he's like, there are some things that happen in nature that we cannot explain. Like this bird, it came back to life magically. This guy said so in an old book, and I believe him. Some of them are actually references to real animals that could do things that they just couldn't explain scientifically. A lot of it is mythology, which they took very seriously as real. Here we go, the soul of the world. How occult virtues are infused into several things by ideas, again, capital I, through the help of the soul of the world, capital S, capital W, and the rays of the stars, and what things abound most with this virtue. This is going to explain a lot of their ideas about what virtues were. Platonists say that all inferior bodies are exemplified by superior ideas. They define an idea to be a form above bodies, souls, minds, and to be but one simple, pure, immutable, indivisible, incorporeal, and eternal, and the nature of all ideas is the same. So, think about the fact that fire has existed across all of history, across all cultures. We all have a word for fire, we all have this thought of fire, this concept of fire, and so outside of the physical realm, in the this cultural subconscious, there's always this idea of fire. And they're going to talk about how that is kind of the source of specific kinds of virtues and things. Let's see if this guy explains it any better than I do. No, he just quotes another guy that wrote it in a complicated way. They place ideas in the first place in the very goodness itself, God by way of cause. And they are distinguished amongst themselves by some relative considerations only, lest whatsoever is in the world should be but one thing without any variety, and that they agree in essence, lest God should be a compound substance. In the second place, they place them in the very intelligible itself, the soul of the world, differing the one from the other by absolute form, so that all the ideas in God are but one form. In the soul of the world they are many. See appendix. So, the soul of the world is another idea of kind of the collective unconscious, if I remember correctly. Here he's saying there are ideas that represent, they are the eternal, indestructible concepts of things, and they spring from God. They are purest in God's eyes, in God's mind. God conceives of fire. That fire is the idea of fire, the concept of it that we all know and understand, that we can all, if I say that word, you see that in your mind, you know what it is, and it is the source of all fire. It radiates down from the stars, from God. That idea kind of is diluted down into the physical realm so that any kind of like little spark of life is descended from the true concept of fire. There is an eternal source of the concept and idea of fire. It comes down to us through God and through the stars, and every kind of fire in the world is a dilution, a smaller version of that concept. That's the best way I can think of to explain what he's trying to say here. In the soul of the world there be many seminal forms of things, as ideas in the mind of God, by which forms she did in the heavens above the stars shape to frame herself also, and stamped upon all those properties. On the stars, therefore, shapes and properties, all virtues of inferior species, as also their properties depend, so that every species hath its celestial shape or figure suitable to it, from which also proceeds a wonderful power of operating, which proper gift it receives from its own idea, through the seminal forms of the soul of the world. For ideas are not only essential causes of every species, but are the causes of every virtue which is in the species. Then this is that which many philosophers say, that the properties which are in the nature of things, which virtues indeed are the operations of the ideas, and are moved by certain virtues, such as have a certain and such foundation, not fortuitous nor casual, but efficacious, powerful, and sufficient, doing nothing in vain. So a virtue is a quality that something has, and say that we have the virtue of the inner heat that keeps us alive. It is a gift from the concept of fire, the virtue of heat, that kind of idea. Or the virtue of being immune to a certain kind of poison. some animal can't be poisoned by such a thing. That virtue comes from some specific concept that radiates down from the starlight. They really truly believed that the heavens were out there past the furthest planet we could see, and that God's light and the celestial light kind of radiated down and was polluted a little bit by the various planets and things that had to pass to get here, which is why Earth's not as perfect as heaven, and that all that was filtered through the stars to our world. Okay. Let's see. He keeps talking about virtues and all the special weird things that specific animals and plants can do. Here he's going to define more about the spirit of the world. So let's see if this makes that more clear. Democritus and Orpheus and many Pythagoreans, having most diligently searched into the virtues of celestial things and natures of inferior things, said that all things are full of God, and not without cause, for there is nothing of such transcending virtues which, being destitute of divine assistance, is content with the nature of itself. Also they called those divine powers which are diffused in things gods, which Zoroaster called divine allurements, Synesius symbolic enticements. Others called them lives, and some souls, saying that the virtue of things did depend upon these, because it is the property of the soul to be from one matter extended into diverse things about which it operates. So is a man who extends his intellect unto intelligible things, and his imagination unto imaginable things. And this is that which they understood when they said that the soul of one thing went out, and went into another thing, altering it, and hindering the operation of it. As a diamond hinders the operation of a lodestone, that it cannot attract iron. So, the idea here is the soul of the world, that it is the soul of the whole universe, and that soul enters into us and acts through us. We would not exist without this soul that various people assign to various things, but comes from God, the soul of the world, the essence that's in everything. There's a little piece of it in us. Seeing the soul is the first thing that is movable, and as they say, is moved of itself. But the body, or the matter, is of itself unable and unfit for motion, and doth much degenerate from the soul. Therefore, they say, there is need of a more excellent medium, such as one that may be as it were no soul, no body, but as it were a soul. Or as it were no soul, but as it were a body, by which the soul may be joined to the body. They conceive such a medium to be the soul of the world, the quintessence. So it's what connects the soul and the body. It's the fifth element, kind of, quintessence. Because it is not from the four elements, but a certain fifth thing, having it being above and besides them. It's a hard thing to define, but it's a type of energy, soul energy, kind of chi maybe, that comes from God, and it animates everything. It's in everything. It is the soul of the world, the quintessence. You'll find this similar idea in a lot of different cultures, and this is his version of it. There is therefore such a kind of spirit required to be, as it were the medium, whereby celestial souls are joined to gross bodies, and bestow upon them wonderful gifts. This spirit is after the same manner in the body of the world, as ours in the body of man. For as the powers of our soul are communicated to the members of the body by the spirit, so also the virtue of the soul of the world is diffused through all things by quintessence. For there is nothing found in the whole world that hath not a spark of the virtue thereof. Yet it is more, nay, most of all, infused into those things which have received or taken in most of this spirit. Now this spirit is received or taken in by the rays of the stars, so far forth as things render themselves comfortable to them. All right, let's see. That's more about virtues. There's a whole chapter here where he describes how the virtues, the things that the quintessence and the stars shine down and give to certain things, how they can cause friendship or hatred between specific things because those virtues basically make them enemies. How fire and water are. There's a whole chapter here that says, things like Jupiter is friends with the moon, but Jupiter does not get along with the sun because their virtues are very different. They do that with animals. They do that with everything. Okay, that's more about enmities. Basically, this animal does not get along with this one. This one does not get along with this one. And because of that, you would know okay, if I'm going to cast a spell or do some kind of ritual with this kind of creature or element, well, I know it doesn't get along with this. Can't use that. I know this rock doesn't get along with this rock, so you don't want to use them together, but these two rocks are friendly, so using them together is helpful. Let's see, what's a good thing to close on? Chapter 22. How inferior things are subjected to superior bodies, and how the bodies, the actions, and dispositions of men are ascribed to stars and signs. It is manifest that all things inferior are subject to superior, and after a manner they are one in the other. In inferior are superior, and in superior are inferior. Again, that's as above, so below. The superior has power over the inferior. The stars have power over us because they influence us. But they also, as we have fire inside ourselves, the heaven has fire. There's these correspondences that define all these relationships. So in the heaven are things terrestrial, but as in their cause and in a celestial manner. And in the earth are things celestial, but after a terrestrial manner, as in effect. So all the causes are in heaven, the spark of first fire. There's fire down here, but it's a diluted kind of fire because the heavenly fire is better. So we say there be certain things which are solary, and certain which are lunary, in which the sun and moon make a strong impression of their virtue. Whence it is that these kinds of things receive more operations and properties like to those of the stars and signs which they are under. So we know that solary things respect the heart and head, by reason that Leo is the house of the sun, and Aries the exaltation of the sun. So this is all the logic of how the stars give us our virtues, the heavenly light and ideas and God, all that shines down through us and creates virtues, influences the world. Well, certain things are more influenced by certain stars, and that defines what they are. Very fiery elements are going to be more influenced by the sun because it's just defined as fiery and that kind of thing. So he's going to walk through what certain things are attached to certain stars. In reference to these, it is necessary to know how man's body is distributed to planets and signs. Know, therefore, that according to the doctrine of the Arabians, the sun rules over the brain, heart, the thigh, the marrow, the right eye, and the spirit. Here, he's probably referencing the fact that for a long time, a lot of Greek and European mythology and alchemy and occultist stuff, their research, was saved by the Middle East because I discussed in previous videos, there were some wars, there was the Crusades, Europe started to falter and lose, and the Middle Eastern folks won a lot of battles, so they conquered Alexandria, they took a lot of their books and research back with them, and then occultists back home got interested, started researching it themselves, and there was this bloom of the Islamic Golden Age where all the great research was happening over there. So by the time we get to this period, he's going to have read a lot of these resources and things, even European things, through that lens because they were the ones that hung on to that research and continued it for a long time. Also, the tongue, the mouth, and the rest of the organs of the senses, as well as internal as external, the hands, feet, legs, nerves, and power of imagination, all of that is assigned to the sun. Mercury rules over the spleen, stomach, bladder, womb, right ear, and also the faculty of common sense. Saturn rules over the liver and fleshy part of the stomach. Jupiter over the belly and navel, whence it is written by the ancients that the effigy of a navel was laid upon the temple of Jupiter Hammon. Also, some attribute to him the ribs, breast, bowels, blood, arms, right hand, and left ear, and the powers natural. Some set Mars over the blood and veins and kidneys, the bag of the gall, the buttocks, the back, and motion of the sperm, and irascible power. Again, they set Venus over the kidneys, testicles, privates, womb, seed, conspicable power. Also the flesh, fat, belly, breast, navel, and all such parts as serve to venereal acts. The backbone and loins. Also the head, mouth, with which they give a kiss as a token of love. Now the moon, although she may challenge the whole body and every member thereof, according to the variety of signs, yet more particularly they ascribe to her the brain, lung, marrow of the backbone, the stomach, the menstruals, and all other excrements, and the left eye, as also the power of increasing. But Hermes saith that there are 7 holes in the head of an animal distributed to the 7 planets, the right ear to Saturn, the left to Jupiter, the right nostril to Mars, the left to Venus, the right eye to the Sun, the left to the Moon, and the mouth to Mercury. The several signs also of the zodiac take care of their members. So Aries governs the head and face, Taurus the neck, Gemini the arms and shoulders, Cancer the breasts, lungs, stomach, and arms, Leo the heart, stomach, liver, and back, Virgo the bowels and bottom of the stomach, Libra the kidneys, thighs, buttocks, Scorpius the genitals, privities, and womb, Sagittarius the thigh and groins, Capricornus the knees, Aquarius the legs and shins, Pisces the feet. All this stuff had a huge influence on science at the time. Remember in previous videos we've talked about how literally this was seen as scientific, and doctors would even put off performing surgeries or specific treatments to a specific day of the week because that was seen as the day of the specific star that ruled over the limb or piece of the body that was being performed on. They would harvest the herbs they used in medicines at specific times of day and under specific stars because they were associated with those stars. That's how much this influenced science of the time. Is there a difference in meaning between right and left in terms of body parts? Probably mostly in the sense that right and left had specific associations with good and evil. Because most people were right-handed, it was seen as proper and good and masculine. Left was associated with evil and weakness and femininity. Partly that also comes from the Kabbalah, where the right side of the tree is masculine, the left side is feminine and evil, and not necessarily always evil so much as what we maybe see as negative, like anger, violence, the darker emotions. That can definitely lead to evil, and some people definitely interpreted it that way. I think we're going to call it there. I hope y'all enjoyed it. We've gone kind of skimmed through 22 chapters of this enormous book. We may do this again if folks enjoyed it. Another occult lesson focused on this book, because it covers so much occult history and ideas that pervade through so many other researchers' works and ideas. And of course, it influences the various fictions that we all enjoy. This book is actually part of a puzzle in Haunting Ground, and the ideas are definitely referenced in a lot of different fictional universes, for sure. I mean, you probably all heard Agrippa, at least the name, if you don't know who he was or what he wrote. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back for some more Kuan in maybe an hour or so. Gotta get some lunch. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you like what I do and want to support it, there are links in the description. You can become a member of the channel on Patreon or YouTube for as little as 99 cents a month. Members can get access to my Silent Hill research books for free. They can request specific streams and readings and movies, all kinds of stuff. You can also purchase my Silent Hill books. They are still discounted for the pre-order for Silent Hill 3, which I spoke to my artist and should be done next Friday. I think is going to be the official day that I can show y'all everything, the cover and all that. Thank you all once again. Thank you to all the members who have been here today. Daniel, Jeff, Billy, Phil, Pablo. You're all amazing and wonderful. Thank you for supporting the channel. Jessica, thanks so much. And I will see you guys in a little bit for some Kuan. Bye.